We are back again and we're working on the 33 again. So I've accumulated some more parts during the week and we're going to fit them. Surprise, surprise. Bet you guys weren't expecting that. So I'm going to start off by making the turbo lines, but I've also got to make power steering lines. I've made AN lines before on this channel and it's not very fun to watch or do, so I'll probably just make them all. I'll show you how I routed them because we have a lot to do and not a lot of time to do it, so I'll be back. Confession time. It's the next day and I have been busy and I have filmed none of it because I just got sidetracked and stuck into it. So there's been a bit of progress. I had the whole hot side off so I could run the coolant bypass line with the AN fittings welded onto it. Did that so I could make the water lines for the turbo. I ran the oil lines for the turbo, both the feed and the return. The return just goes to a fitting that's welded into the aluminum part of the sump, and our oil feed's just coming off that T-piece, runs underneath the sump. It's pretty common for Barra folk to run it along the front. I hate the look of that, so I've run it under the sump because I think it's a bit nicer. I will admit, I'm not a huge fan of the lines that I've made for this car. In my opinion, it looks a bit bulky, and I think in the future I might upgrade these to hard lines just because it's pretty tight in there. I've allowed some space when I made the manifold to run the lines, but there could always be more. So I think hard lines are going to be the go in the future, but for now it should get the car going. So the exhaust manifold is permanently fixed in place. We have our gasket in, all the bolts are in, it's all buttoned up, ready to go. The intake side I had completely off as well, and I did this for two reasons. Firstly, I welded some tabs to the underside of the plenum just so I could tie the loom to something so it wasn't just floating around there. And secondly, I needed to put the intake manifold gasket on it. So that's all in, all the bolts are in, that's fixed in place for good. I've also gone ahead and chucked spark plugs and the coil packs in. I've run the loom for that. I've plugged the O2 in. This thing's really close to starting now. So next weekend we'll have the tail shaft back from GJ Driveline, so we'll be able to chuck that in. Whilst we're chucking that in, we'll probably do the clutch and the flywheel, and that way we'll be able to crank the motor over. So if we chuck oil and a filter in it, in theory this thing will run. Well, it's been about a week now since I've filmed anything on the car. We have something cool to install now, which is our clutch. So we have an extreme twin plate button clutch. So we got our flywheel here with our basket, ARP bolts for the flywheel. We got our pressure plate here and our twin discs with our little spacer doodad things. On top of that, what I'm really stoked about, we have our tail shaft. So I got this made up at GJ Drivelines. We're using 1350 Spicer Uni with a billet yoke. I'll chuck the measurements I used for this specific car with this specific combo. So if anyone else is doing this exact same deal, you can just go straight to them and tell them exactly what you need. Couldn't tell you if coupe and sedan are the same. So maybe coupe guys double check before you go and buy one of these, but super happy with that. So I'm gonna go ahead now and push the car over to that hoist. We'll pull the gearbox out. We'll get the clutch assembled and in place, get the box back in and chuck in our brand new tail shaft. So the box is in. I didn't film it because I didn't know how long it was going to take, and I'm running off limited battery here. As you can see, it's a relatively snug fit. It gets in there, not too bad. I haven't bashed my tunnel at all. This is the RB factory crossmember for T56. I have elongated some of the holes just so it would fit up a little easier. I've gone ahead and chucked the exhaust back on as well. The tail shaft is in there too. We had to split the bell housing and the gearbox apart to get it in, just for clearance issues. And another thing is we're going to need a remote bleeder for this, as it's too tight in here to fit the extended type bleeder. Other than those few things, it went in pretty smoothly, went in like any other box. Yeah, nothing too crazy to report. Honestly, the swap has been really straightforward so far. There hasn't been any massive hitches, but I also haven't started it yet or driven it, so we'll see how that all goes. That's gonna do me for tonight. It's fucking pretty late here now. Hopefully tomorrow we can get oil and a filter and I might start it, but with that being said, I've got a new car to pick up tomorrow as well because I'm financially irresponsible.
2 weeks later.
All right, so I've put oil and a filter in the car now. I'm gonna pull the oil feed off the turbo and crank it over a bit to see if it builds oil pressure. If it builds oil pressure, I'll connect the fuel pump back up and we'll see if it runs. Will it even turn over? All right, it's gonna make a mess maybe. Now, I don't know what was in this before, so I almost don't want to put it back in the motor, you know? No, this had some sort of fucking acid in it, I know. I used this to strip the anodized fittings before, I'm not. So we'll chuck the oil feed back on the turbo. I'll connect the fuel pump back up. Oh, we're gonna have to set the base pressure for the pressure reg, but then we should be able to start it. So we'll come back when we're ready to crank it again. See if this bitch runs. Fired for a second there. So we had to do some troubleshooting. It would fire a couple of cylinders off and then the more you cranked it, the less it wanted to start. So I plugged up some vac leaks that I forgot about. We've bumped up the fuel pressure back up to 4 bar, and we also unplugged the map sensor because it's the incorrect map sensor for our flash tune. Now, I'll be honest, I know it starts and runs now because it started and ran. I've currently got the Skits Falcon running to charge up the battery because we don't have a drive belt on this at the moment because our power steering pump isn't plumbed. It's louder than I thought it was going to be, which take it as you will. I don't think that's necessarily the best thing because it is a street car. So I might have to add a muffler in again, or like a Varix or something to shut her up for street duties. I'll get the battery off the Falcon, put it in the Japanese Falcon, and I'll start her up for you so you can have a listen. We'll chuck the jump pack back on, still on its thing. Obviously I can't run this thing for ages because it's got no radiator or alternator. So I'll start her up. I have no idea how that's going to come through on the mic. In person, this thing is really loud and it's really raspy. I think it's going to need at least another like hot dog in it or maybe a muffler. I think a Varix will do the trick because we do want it to be loud on track obviously, but yeah, it runs, so there is that.